Excellent. Welcome, folks. Welcome to the My Black Diabetes Meal Plan podcast. I am Dr. Sean Smith. I am here once again with Dr. Joel Fuhrman. And in today's broadcast, we need to address the hidden value of tremendous eating. So far, our chats have been focused on diabetes reversal for obvious reasons. But the hidden value I want to address today is the power of plant foods to help people with diabetes also prevent cancer. Okay, and so, Dr. Furman, we've talked about G bombs, greens, onions, mushrooms, beans, seeds, and nuts. But you say one specific group of plants stands above the rest when it comes to protecting everybody, including those with diabetes, from cancer. And this special group of plants, a plant and vegetable, are called cruciferous vegetables. So, what are cruciferous vegetables and what effects have they been shown to have when given to a population of people as compared to regular old vegetables?
Right. And I'm glad you're talking about that because it's really important that people recognize this, that particularly green cruciferous vegetables, and those are vegetables that have those glucosinolates in them, and people know them like broccoli, Brussels sprouts, kale, collards, mustard greens, turnip greens, arugula, watercress, all these vegetables, broccolini, broccoli rabe, cabbage, Chinese cabbage, Savoy cabbage, bok choy. There's a whole host of them, and I grow them. I particularly grow a lot of bok choy because they don't get any bugs on them. Bok choy grows so freely and so it doesn't get aphids and whiteflies and slugs, and cabbages are harder to grow because they get bugs in them, and sometimes even kale and cabbage will get aphids and things. But bok choy is so easy to grow. But the bok choy is so great because you can juice it, you can saute it, you can eat it raw, you can put it in your salad. It's just also so versatile. So I grow a lot of that. It's also super high in calcium. But these cruciferous vegetables as a whole, like you're saying, are the most protective foods. I always say, if you don't like green cruciferous vegetables, you better live close to a hospital. Because the body is designed with the necessity to have these raw materials to fuel our immune function, our brain, our cells, and to protect against cancer. But not only to protect against cancer, we'll go into that in more detail, of course, all the data there, but also green vegetables are most powerfully linked with protection against heart disease, atherosclerosis, plaque buildup, and to accelerate plaque reversal. Even though they're the strongest food to protect against cancer, they're also the strongest food to protect against heart attack. I also, I joke around when I'm speaking to the group of people I lecture to. I divide them into 3 groups, and I say to the first group, what's the food most protective against cancer of all the foods? And the right answer, I encourage them, and they say kale. I said green cruciferous vegetables, particularly green leafy cruciferous vegetables, are the most powerful food against cancer. Okay, you group got this. Let's go to the middle group. Okay, you guys now tell me what's the food most protective against heart attacks and strokes? And they blueberries, this, that. They start to guess. I said, no, it's green cruciferous vegetables, the same as the first group. I go to the third group, and I say, what's the food most protective against dementia? Is it blueberries? Is it acai berries? Is it this? No, it's green cruciferous vegetables are the most powerful disease protective foods designed for the human species. And without those chemicals in those foods, we can't be normal. Then we develop disease. They're absolutely essential for the development of the human species. And that's why we see so much illness and diseases. And as a primate, all the primates live on a tremendous volume of greens. That's what they're designed for. And we're a primate. We can't, our cells are thriving on those. We have this transcription protein called the NRF2 transcription protein. Now, the NRF2 transcription protein, it reads and it you could say puts into action the antioxidant response element in the cell. That's called the ARE, as an abbreviation for antioxidant response element. There's a portion of our DNA that's overly responsible for protecting us against disease, not just for giving us eyesight and to making the heart beat and regulating our blood pressure, or making us be able to run and get oxygen to our. So part of our DNA is just for like repair, removal of toxins, fixing broken DNA cross-links, removing methylation defects. There's part of our cell that just is working to help the cell keep clean and keeps healthy. And that part of the cell DNA is activated by this transcription protein that in turn is activated by the ITCs in green cruciferous vegetables. Other substances too, but the ITCs are the best activator of that. And that same antioxidant response element that throws out waste and repairs broken DNA crosslinks and methylation defects that, if accumulated, could lead to cancer, it also actually prevents fat or plaque from sticking to the endothelium and prevents inflammation of the endothelium in the interior wall of your blood vessels. So the same antioxidant response element, the same part of the cell, and these parts of the DNA, the ARE, is in all the cells in our body. It's in the cells that line the blood vessels, in the cells that line our heart and our brain, all over the place. And so I want people, it's an important part of the nutritarian approach is for people to use these green cruciferous vegetables and to know how to use them in their diet to maximize the absorption of the isothiocyanates they contain. And as you were alluding to earlier, we have lots of studies on them, on people who had cancer, for example, and eat them, and you're following them for 10 years and see how many die. And we're seeing that that when we look, for example, there's a study on women who had breast cancer. And those who ate a lot of who were fed cruciferous vegetables, they didn't even fix their diet all the way. They just ate cruciferous vegetables, yet their chance of dying of breast cancer went down by 60% compared to the women not eating cruciferous, not pushed to eat those foods. And the same thing we true when we look at preventative studies on people who don't have cancer. And we follow them for years and we see what they get cancer. Even there's studies on the people with the BRCA1 gene and the GSTP1 gene, those genes that increase the risk of breast cancer, that women with consumption of cruciferous vegetables, it prevents the expression of those gene defects and prevents the increased risk of breast cancer that could have occurred from that genetic defect if you weren't eating cruciferous vegetables. I'm saying that nutrition overwhelms genetics. It's more powerful than genetics, and the genetic risks disappear when you eat right. And we also have studies on, for example, we have studies on like 130,000 Asians who tracked their intake of green cruciferous vegetables and showed that there was no threshold effect, meaning that the more green vegetables they ate, the longer the lifespans. And the food most related to being the centenarian was green vegetable, but there was no threshold. Means like with mushrooms, a certain amount is good. After you have like a certain amount, it levels off. You can't just eat, half a cups more. You eat 5 cups of mushrooms, you don't live longer. You have the half a cup, that's enough. Onions are great for you, but you go up to a quarter cup's good, a half a cup's great. Go up to you start to level off. More anti-cancer benefits when you pass over a cup. But not with green vegetables. When you go from 1 cup to 2 cups to 3 cups, they continue to see lifespan enhancement and still benefits effect as people go to higher dosing of green vegetables. So green vegetables, and of course, Americans, the vegetable consumption in America is 2% of the diet. That's all vegetables. That's carrots and tomatoes and everything is 2%. Green vegetables is, I don't know what that is, but it's very small. And this should be the majority of what we're eating. It shouldn't be 2%. Vegetables should be, 60% diet, and green vegetables should be a large portion of that.
And what's so great about that, Dr. Fuhrman, is, if I was taking a look on in one of your texts, it is the end of diabetes. On page 128, you talk about how, even in population studies where they've been able to basically give green vegetables to a population of people, when it was non-cruciferous vegetables, still an impact. 20% for every 20% increase in vegetable intake of that population, there was a 20% decrease in cancer rates. But when they were given cruciferous vegetables to the same populations, all of a sudden, now for every 20% increase in cruciferous vegetable intake, there was a 40% decrease in the risk of cancer. This is, monumental. And so I don't, obviously, over this past year or so, we've been talking about diabetes for obvious reasons, but I can't stress this enough. The foods that help to reverse diabetes are incredible for staving off cancer. And for anyone who understands what it's like to lose someone to cancer, we can sense the power of the individual for leading by example and eating by example. Because I can tell you that, people say to me all the time, hey, look, this meal plan is just for me. My husband's not going to want it. Grandmother's not going to want it. Kids aren't going to want it. It's just for me. Let's just make it for me. Okay, right? But does your husband know that the same cruciferous vegetables that you are eating in order to address and reverse diabetes are the same that can actually be very powerful for preventing and dealing with prostate cancer inside of him, right? And so one of the superpowers of cruciferous vegetables is their ability to prevent hormone sensitive cancers. Can you please explain what are hormone sensitive cancers, and how do these vegetables keep these types of cancers from forming in the body in the first place?
Yeah, and I wanted to add that people should recognize that the same immune system that protects us against cancer is there to protect us against COVID death. And even though cancer death may be looming 20 or 30 years from now, people could be dying in the next year of COVID because of lack of green vegetables, because their immune system is handicapped in a straitjacket. It can't work. You want your immune system. And so we're seeing hospitalizations and deaths from COVID because people don't eat vegetables and don't eat green vegetables. And so it's insane. And why aren't anybody talking about this? So, and you're saying, yes, and the hormonally sensitive cancers are even more, are critically important. And obviously there's lots of reasons why, but
What are they? What is a hormone sensitive cancer? And
predominantly breast cancer and prostate cancer,
okay,
which are
okay.
obviously which are the two most common cancers. The three most common cancers are breast cancer, prostate cancer, and colon cancer. Those are the three most common. But breast and prostate cancer are the most common hormonal sensitive cancers. And then the hormone they're most sensitive to are estrogen and insulin, are the two hormones that there's actually three hormones: estrogen, insulin, and IGF-1, right? Those are the three hormones they're most sensitive to. And obviously all the G bombs, like mushrooms and even soybeans, have lower estrogen levels and anti-estrogenic effects, but so do green vegetables. These green cruciferous vegetables have anti-aromatase effects, which means they lower body's production, the fat cells' production of estrogen, and they have anti-angiogenic effects. So the angiogenesis means the growth of new blood vessels that could feed the growth of tumors, or could feed the growth of metastasized cancers, or could feed the growth of fat on your body. But it's funny how these healthy foods have, you could say, phytonutrients that prevent and fat growth, that are anti-fat storage. You have to, in order to grow a lot of fat, you got to not eat these things that prevent fat from storing on your body. So they have anti-fat storage effects, and when you eat them, they accelerate your loss of fat too. And they say, no way, Jose, I'm not letting you put fat on your body. I'm not letting you get cancer. They're actually fighting. They're working on your behalf all the time that you eat them. And to the extent you chew them better, they work better, because the chemicals that the ITCs that have the best powerful effect of protecting you are not in the vegetable until the cell is broken. And if you chew and don't break open all the cells, most people inhale a salad and break through 10% of the cells, but then you just wasted 90% of the anti-cancer effects. If you eat that salad where you put the arugula or the bok choy or the kale or the collards in that salad, and you really focus on liquefying every mouthful in your mouth before you swallow it, now you can get 10 times the amount of anti-cancer benefits, because you were mindful of chewing and breaking open every cell, forming all the ITCs possible in the mouth.
Oh, we got to pause there. Okay, so ITCs stand for isothiocyanates, and what does it mean to chew them properly? Because look, if I don't choke on it, I chewed it right? So if I'm eating a salad, what should it feel like? What should the consistency of the salad feel like inside of my mouth when I know that I am now releasing the full effect of the ITCs.
You should be trying not to swallow it. Most people eat, and as soon as the particles are small enough, it's gone. As soon as it can fit down their throat, it's gone. You know, I'm watching my dog eat. He like gulps down his food. It's like he didn't chew anything. It was like you gave him the food. He took care of it in like 30 seconds. I gave him, you know, it's like amazing. Don't you chew anything? But, you know, it's like, but no, but with these green vegetables, the anti-cancer effect and the reason why humans can live to 100 years old is because we have these flat teeth that can grind and chew vegetables really well. And if we use them to try to feel, we're liquefying the food in our mouth. So we're swallowing a liquid going down. So when you eat your salad, liquefy it before you swallow it. Chew it as much as you can, retain it in the mouth as long as you can. And by the way, when you could say, well, why not just juice it all, or why not just blend it in a blender then, which you could do that, but you get better effects from doing it with your teeth because you're mixing it with the bacteria in the mouth also produce more nitric oxide and other anti-inflammatory compounds that have anti-inflammatory effects on the endothelial cells of your blood vessels. So you actually get extra benefits from the fact that you're chewing it and mixing these compounds with the bacteria in between your teeth as well at the same time.
That's almost as if we've evolved in order to eat these foods. Almost as if the body has been structured in order to eat these foods. And the very act of chewing is different than blending because there is a biological, if I'm hearing you correctly, there is a biological incentive to chew the food up and keep the organism alive through the interaction between the chewing and the bacteria that's in the mouth circulating and creating this sort of this nitrogen, this what did you call that?
Nitric oxide.
Nitric oxide. Oh, that is mind-blowing.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's the way the body works. It's the cells of the body are designed to function with the foods that primitive humans and primitive primates ate for us to function from those foods. So, but anyway, yeah, and you think about this protective effects against all cancers, and then you think about, look at how this has some historical effect on Black American heritage. And here's the relationship between green vegetables and Black American heritage. Is that in the 1800s and right around and after the Civil War, Blacks were the longest lived people, and they had the most centenarians. The most people living to be 100 years old were among Black Americans because they grew and ate green vegetables as part of their heritage and they might have been kept in slavery, they might have been poor, but they grew gardens and they ate vegetables. Then came the Civil War and the years thereafter with the Jim Crow laws, white supremacy, lynchings, pellagra, the redneck attacks. A lot of Blacks were driven into northern cities, and they were and they were living in areas where they weren't able to get fresh produce anymore. And then they started to develop diseases and become sick because they couldn't get vegetables. And then the medical profession, and we learn in medical school that Black Americans have worse health issues, they're more sick with certain problems, almost as if we're taught that there's a genetic influence on some weakness of having, darker skin, that you're going to be at higher risk of cancer. It's not true because I showed I studied this issue, and when a person of any color skin is put under the same nutritional stress, they're going to develop those genetic and those illnesses and higher risk of certain causes of death and all types of developmental and other problems because of lack of food based for the human body. You put the person back in that society where you have good food, and then they flourish again, both intellectually, emotionally, and of course, against protection against disease. So it used to be that Black Americans ate healthier than the white Caucasian Southerners did, and they had better health because of it. So it's not, you could say, it's against the historical perspective to be eating junk food and processed foods. It's much more in line with heritage and history to eat vegetables and beans, which are so protective against disease.
This is fantastic. So I'm hearing you at once say that in the American scene, we at once had 100 years ago, and this is actually a question, there's question 6 on my little list here. 100 years ago, you have, or even 150 years ago, you have people who
150
are
to 200, yeah.
150 to 200. You have people who are living to be 100 years old, and not just one person or two. There's many people who are, they have the most, Black folks have the most centenarians, right? And then 100 years later, all of a sudden in medical schools, people are being taught that these folks are, sort of genetically inept and somehow more prone to
Genetically
disease. It's like,
inferior in some way,
yeah, and it's like, well, that wasn't true. But grandma lived to 110, right? That
right.
can't be true. So what a one, I think I've heard the narrative of the genetic inferiority thing more than I've heard that, folks were some of the longest lived precisely because they were living off of these cruciferous vegetables. They were growing these vegetables, and had to. And so we were just talking about, speaking of, kind of staving off cancer, and making sure that, one of the things you talk about is the ability for these vegetables to stave off, or I'm sorry, enable cell death. And typically, we don't want to eat things that cause things in us to die, but can you explain why cell death actually is a good thing? And when it comes to protecting the body from cancer, how does cell death protect against DNA damage in people, in populations? Obviously, it was doing it 200 years ago with folks who were growing their own vegetables in their yards. But what about today? What is it about enabling cell death that's actually a good thing when we think about eating cruciferous vegetables?
Right. Because, cells have a surface, and the immune system sends out scouting parties to look at the surfaces of cells and see if they're looking okay or not. And as a cell doesn't become cancer, doesn't go boom from a healthy to cancer. Over a period of decades, we're talking about 20, 30 years, it gradually gets sicker and sicker and eventually becomes cancerous. In the process of a cell becoming unhealthy, dysplastic, starts with inflammation, then it goes to induration, then it goes to ulceration, then it goes to, we're talking about the steps that eventually result in cancer. And of course, when the cell surface, you can imagine, becomes pebbly, or we're starting to see a cell aging prematurely that may turn into a cell that might be cancerous, the immune system could recognize that cell, something wrong with that cell, better to take it out of action before it can do something bad to the body. And so the immune system has the ability to recognize the cells. And of course, we're saying now that the green vegetables, of course, improve the natural killer T cells, the NK cells, and the recognition cells, and the ability to scout, evaluate, and remove, causing the word is apoptosis. The word apoptosis means the immune system attacks and destroys a cell that's abnormal or cancerous. And as you can imagine, I've taken care of a lot of people who have cancer. Even like, for example, even a person in my family, my wife's sister who had cancer about 15, 20 years ago. And, the cancer was a very aggressive cancer that could kill a person. But when you eat this, but chemotherapy isn't going to kill all those cells. It'll kill maybe 999 out of 1,000 cells. So the chemotherapy looks like the cancer's gone. But there's a couple of cells that escape chemotherapy. And then maybe 5 or 10 years later, those cells that escape chemotherapy were replicating and became cancer back again. And it's that second reoccurrence of the cancer that kills you, because now when it grows back, they're not going to be that susceptible to chemotherapy, because the cells that now are replicating are ones that escaped chemotherapy to begin with, are the ones that were resistant to it. So what I'm saying is that you have a big tumorous mass, and maybe your immune system can't remove that giant mass. Maybe it's good to have it surgically removed or something. But those stray cells that escape chemo, or that escape surgery, or that may be in your body, or they're in a person's body before they have cancer, when they're just starting to get the early stages and have some small amount of cells that are abnormal or cancerous, that's when the immune system has the ability to scout, address, and remove those cells. And that's why some of these people under my care are alive now 15, 20, 25 years later who had serious cancers. One woman, Pam, had I think it was 1997, which is 23 years ago, she had ovarian cancer that metastasized to her lungs, and she had collapse of fluid in her lung. She had her lungs full of fluid. She was given, it might be 3 to 6 months to live. And now she's alive, and now it's 24 years later, because she would have never been surviving the ovarian cancer 24 years later had she not adopted this program. And I can give one example after another. Another person, Irene, who had stage 4 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma that completely melted away and the tumors disappeared, eating these vegetables, high in cruciferous vegetables and stuff like that. So it seems that in so many of my experience with patients, I never ruled out the fact that even if they had cancer, didn't give up on them. Said, you never know, but go do this perfectly. And for lo and behold, like shockingly, these people, survived and had no cancer. And in some cases like Irene, never received chemo, never received surgery. Her tumors melted away, her lymphoma disappeared.
Incredible.
Really, it's amazing. I just published a series that came out in the International Journal of Plant-Based, International Journal of Disease Prevention and Reversal. The International Journal of Disease Prevention and Reversal. It was just published this month, a case series of a lot of these cancer patients I put in there,
Incredible. And that's why every single person who comes on board with us, we send them a T20 diabetes plan, because we understand that when you are the same immune system that can be restored in order to bring the body back into metabolic equilibrium and reverse diabetes, is the same one that can actually be fortified to protect you against cancer. And so we want to give people the best opportunity to do that. So folks, if you are looking for a plan that is designated to do exactly the things that we've been talking about doing today, go to myblackdiabetesmealplan.com, and every single person that comes on is going to have Dr. Fuhrman's T20 plan sent to them in the mail. And so, Dr. Fuhrman, I thank you so much for jumping on. What a fantastic introduction. And there are some things in there that you said that I want to circle back to on our next talk, because if it stands to reason that stopping the cells from manipulating and cells that are aging can be killed, if they can enable a cell death, what becomes very powerful is the anti-aging effects of these same cruciferous vegetables, right? And so I think that would be a relationship worth exploring, because you mean I don't have to have wrinkle lines and crow lines. I don't have to look old before I'm old, right? So that'll be something that we handle in the upcoming chapters of our discussion. Thank you so much, Dr. Fuhrman.
My pleasure.
Look forward to our next conversation.
Good luck, everybody. Take care.